Okay, so today I am going to discuss certain points which are going to be very helpful when you are developing Portlet using JSR168 API. JSR160 API is the primary Portlet API which has been used for long, although nowadays Portlets are being developed using JSR126, JSR286 API, but JSR168 has the basic concepts which everyone should know. So I'm not going into the concepts. I'm trying to cover certain guidelines that one should follow while developing portlets. So I'm straight away starting onto the guidelines. And the first guideline is use locale specific resource bundle file for displaying caption on the JSP page. This is helpful in many ways, because the second guideline which I would be telling you that would be directly related to this one only. The first guideline, I am repeating it again, use locale specific resource bundle file for displaying caption on JSP pages. Now the second guideline, which in turn is related to first one, to display error messages, use their locale specific methods. So how can you use the locale specific methods? Only when you would be having locale specific resource bundle file. Okay. Third guideline, the use of the portlet reference object for storing personalization related data should be done. Portlet reference object for storing personalization related data. And why are we doing that? So that preferences we can modify as per the requirement in process action method. Okay, the next guideline, use portlet session with portlet scope for managing beans. Okay, always use portlet session with portlet scope. There are sessions, portlets session and portlet scope, session scope, so always keep it in portlet scope. JSR168 supports only expiration based caching, which is by default set to 0. Change it according to your need. As per your need, you can change the expiration of the caching. Next one is for static content portlet, set it to -1. It's about expiration based caching. Expiration based caching for a static content, you can set it to -1. You don't want to expire it. Try to finish all portlet functionality in default mode only. Default modes are view, edit and help. So try to complete all the portlet functionality in default modes only. Do not use additional modes because their handling further complicates it. Do not use instance variable on the portlet level. They might poses unpredictable behavior. This is same as what happens in servlet. In servlet also we normally see that if we define certain instance variables on the servlet level, then problem starts coming in case of multiple threads and the multiple accesses of the same servlet. On the same way, the problem can occur in the portlet as well. Always pass the data using beans. Don't use the primitive variables. Always try to use the beans, and that is the most suitable mechanism of porting the data from one place to other. Okay, next one, always maintain version number for your code. Very important for tracking purpose. If on certain action processing is not required, then make those URLs render URL, not action URL. Action URL always takes time in processing. They undergo through more phases as compared to render URL. So if for a particular action processing is not required, just use render URL and not action URL. Do not use any of the following tag while writing JSPs, because your JSP page is rendered inside angle bracket TD, starting angle bracket TD and closing angle bracket TD tag only. So the tags which this point is trying to cover are HTML, head and body. These tags should not be used. Okay, should not be used on JSP because these are rendered inside TD, so they won't have any meaning. Okay. Next is if using tables in JSPs, then do not make them of the fixed width. Use width in percentage. That should always be done. I mean, it's not guideline for portlet only. In any application development, it should be done on that basis only, because if you want to be using the percentage instead of that, you would be using the pixels. That can create problem in different resolutions, different browsers, different systems. Okay, so then let's come to the next guideline. What it says is, on JSP pages, do not use HTML style commenting. Always use commenting of scriptlet type. Why? Because the HTML comment gets transferred directly to the browser, and we don't want that to happen. Do not use inline style sheet in JSP, because the style sheet is taken care by the portlet administrator. Okay, so it's not a good practice of using style sheet in JSP. Try to avoid complex JavaScript on the JSP pages. That is the normal rule, that is a global rule, in fact, not only for the portlets, but specifically for the portlet, it should be followed. Try to avoid the complex JavaScript on JSP pages. If required, then they must be prefixed with namespace tag. All shared jar files resources must be kept inside the shared directory onto the server, that we normally do. Put all the portlet in the same web archive. All the portlet should be collected together into the single web archive, which shares the session or the application scope. It should be in session or application scope. The way WAR file happens is we maintain the session there. Update the portlet preferences data inside process action method only. That we were discussing under the first point, that the portlet preferences, where we were setting the personalization data that can be edited, but that should be done into the process action method only. Always keep the portlet session time as portlet timeout. Keep it same. Do not use thread inside the portlet class. That can create further complexity. Try to put all domain related portlet into single activity. Use JSP for displaying tabular data instead of XML, XSLT wherever possible, because they need to be passed on every request, where the JSP is compiled into a servlet and behave faster. Okay. Use taglib wherever it is possible. Taglib should be used wherever it is possible. So these were the certain guidelines. If these will be followed throughout the project, then I'm sure we won't be having a lot of problem in the review and the maintenance later on, and a lot of review comments will not be received. So I'm expecting that everyone will be following these rules, and these golden rules which I have just described to all of you, those should be kept with you. Keep them with you every time, and anytime you are developing any portlet, just go through these once and keep in mind that you are not violating any of the rules. I hope we will be following these religiously. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I want to see you following these. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Take care.